Oops. Didn't mean to rip royalty's pants. They laughed. She stood frozen, humiliated, her fatigues torn open at the thigh, surrounded by recruits who didn't see her as one of them. She didn't yell, didn't cry. But then the gate opened. A general stepped out. No words, no salute, just a slow, deliberate walk straight toward her. And every joke died because he wasn't looking at them. He was coming for her. If you believe dignity can be restored without a single word type, stand with her. It happened during the middle of a routine morning drill session. Physical training completed, cadets relaxing in formation, engaging in casual conversation, testing boundaries with each other as young recruits typically do. She was relatively new to the training program, consistently quiet during group interactions, barely spoke unless directly addressed by instructors, didn't push back when subjected to teasing or harassment. Behind her back, they had assigned her degrading nicknames: Ghost Girl, for her silenced desk legs, for her perceived weakness, and sometimes simply tourist, to suggest she didn't belong in military training. One of the male recruits deliberately tripped her as she walked past their group. Another reached out ostensibly to catch her from falling and maliciously AR her military fatigues at the outer seam. The ripping sound was distinctly loud. The erupting laughter was considerably louder. Her pants split nearly to mid-thigh level. Everyone in the immediate area witnessed the humiliating incident. She froze completely in position, didn't attempt to cover herself, didn't shout protest or demands, just stood there motionless, like her entire body had transformed into rigid steel. "Terribly sorry, Private," the ringleader smirked with obvious false sympathy. "Didn't know they issued hand-me-down uniforms to housekeeping staff." Several other recruits eagerly joined the harassment, laughing with cruel amusement, mockingly imitating military salutes, deliberately tossing her water canteen into the dirt. She didn't bend down to retrieve her scattered equipment. She didn't move at all from her position. The group continued their harassment, emboldened by her apparent passivity and the absence of immediate authority figures. "Maybe she's lost," one suggested with false concern. "Should we call her a taxi back to civilian life? Or maybe she's exactly where she belongs," another added, getting shown her real place. The cruelty escalated as they realized she wouldn't defend herself verbally or physically. Her silence seemed to encourage their assumption that she was helpless and defenseless. They had completely misread her stillness as weakness rather than controlled restraint. Her lack of reaction wasn't submission. It was discipline that exceeded their understanding. She had learned to maintain composure under pressure that these recruits couldn't imagine. But they interpreted her professionalism as an invitation for further abuse. "Look at her, just standing there," someone mocked. "Like a statue. Maybe that's all she's good for." The harassment continued without intervention from nearby personnel, who were either unaware of the situation or chose not to interfere. Military training environments often included hazing and aggressive competition that crossed ethical boundaries. But this particular incident exceeded normal training pressures. It had become targeted humiliation designed to break her spirit and force her withdrawal from the program. The perpetrators assumed they were dealing with someone who lacked the fortitude for military service, someone who would eventually quit under pressure and confirm their prejudiced assumptions. They had no understanding of her actual background, training, or capabilities. To them, she appeared to be exactly what they expected: a weak civilian who had somehow mistakenly entered military training. Her quiet demeanor and reluctance to engage in aggressive confrontation reinforced their stereotypical thinking. They couldn't recognize that true strength often manifested as controlled restraint rather than reactive aggression. Her stillness wasn't fear. It was the calm that came from experience with far more serious situations. She had faced genuine danger that made their juvenile harassment seem insignificant. But they had no way of knowing that their victim possessed capabilities that far exceeded their own. The humiliation continued for several more minutes, without any sign that she would break or respond until something unexpected happened that would completely transform the situation. 10 seconds of absolute silence settled over the training area. Then the main facility gate buzzed electronically, opened with mechanical precision. A military convoy had arrived at the training facility, official escort vehicles, standard transport trucks, and one distinctive black SUV positioned prominently at the convoy center. Initially, no one paid particular attention to the arrival. Military vehicles came and went regularly during training operations until the black SUV stopped directly adjacent to the drill yard where the harassment was occurring. The rear door opened smoothly. A full general stepped out alone. No accompanying entourage or staff officers. Heads throughout the training area turned instinctively. Some cadets automatically straightened their posture in response to senior officer presence. But he issued no orders, conducted no inspection, made no announcements. He surveyed the drillard with experienced eyes, then began walking directly toward her position. No one initially understood why a general would approach a group of training recruits. As he moved closer with measured steps, the cruel laughter gradually faded into uncomfortable silence. By the time he reached the group's immediate area, absolutely no one was speaking. He didn't acknowledge the male recruits, didn't ask who had caused the incident, didn't demand explanations. He positioned himself directly in front of her, looked straight into her eyes with obvious recognition, then took one deliberate step backward and rendered a crisp military salute. Every breath in the training yard seemed to vanish simultaneously. She returned the salute with perfect precision, professional, silent, controlled. He maintained the salute for exactly the appropriate duration, then lowered his hand with military formality. He then turned deliberately, looked once at the surrounding crowd with unmistakable authority, and walked away without speaking a single word. The impact was immediate and profound. "Wait, who exactly is she?" someone whispered with growing comprehension. The ringleader who had initiated the harassment backed away instinctively, stammering with obvious confusion and mounting fear. Why? Why would a full general salute a training recruit? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Military protocol was clear. Generals didn't randomly salute junior personnel without significant reason. The salute indicated recognition of superior service, exceptional achievement, or command authority, none of which seemed possible for someone they had dismissed as a weak civilian. That wasn't a courtesy salute, one more experienced recruit observed quietly. That was recognition. The implications began sinking in among the witnesses. If a general recognized her with formal military honors, she possessed credentials that completely contradicted their assumptions. Her quiet demeanor hadn't indicated weakness. It had indicated professional discipline. Her refusal to respond to harassment hadn't shown fear. It had shown restraint and appropriate to someone with superior training. They had been tormenting someone whose military qualifications exceeded their understanding. "She's not a recruit," another whispered with dawning realization. "She's something else." The torn fatigues, the scattered equipment, the cruel laughter, all of it suddenly seemed not just inappropriate, but potentially career-ending. They had humiliated someone who commanded respect from the highest levels of military leadership. The general's public recognition hadn't been coincidental. He had witnessed the harassment and chosen to respond with a display of respect that communicated more than any verbal reprimand. His salute had instantly transformed her status from victim to someone deserving of recognition, and simultaneously transformed her tormentors from dominant bullies to individuals who had committed serious misconduct. The power dynamic had completely reversed through a single gesture. She remained motionless, but her stillness now appeared dignified rather than passive. The same composure that had seemed like weakness now obviously represented strength. And the recruits who had mocked her began understanding they had made a catastrophic error in judgment. By noon, every instructor on the training facility knew about the incident. By dinner mess hall, every cadet had heard various versions of what had occurred. Her personnel file had been classified Level 7 security clearance, which meant not even the base commander possessed full access to her complete service record. The general who had saluted her research revealed he had served under his father, one of the most decorated military commanders in recent operational history. But her individual record wasn't simply about family legacy or inherited reputation. She possessed extensive field experience, documented embedded service in hostile operational areas. One highly classified mission with full combat authorization at age 22. Her current assignment to the training academy wasn't disciplinary action for misconduct. It was protective reassignment following combat service. She saved an entire forward operations team. Someone whispered through mess hall conversations. Completed the mission without backup support. The unit patch on her old fatigues barely visible and worn Special Reconnaissance Division now officially disbanded due to classified operational requirements. One instructor feeling obligated to set the record straight posted her training qualification scores publicly. Top 1% in marksmanship across all weapon systems. First place in physical endurance testing. Perfect attendance record with 0 missed examinations. The cadets who had mockingly harassed her immediately reassigned to disciplinary units for code violation and personal misconduct. She said absolutely nothing throughout the entire revelation process. Never asked for punishment of her tormentors, never requested official credit or recognition for her service. She simply continued her routine, arriving exactly on time for every scheduled activity. The contrast was stark and educational. While her harassers were receiving formal disciplinary action, she maintained the same professional demeanor that had characterized her behavior before the incident. Her response to humiliation had been dignity. Her response to vindication was continued service. The lesson wasn't lost on the remaining cadetses who witnessed the entire sequence of events. Real strength didn't require aggressive displays or verbal dominance. True military bearing manifested as consistent professionalism regardless of circumstances. She had demonstrated more leadership through silence than others achieved through loud assertions. Her background explained everything about her behavior during their harassment. Someone with combat experience wouldn't be intimidated by juvenile training exercises. Someone with classified operational history wouldn't need to prove capabilities to inexperienced recruits. Someone with documented life-saving service wouldn't feel threatened by verbal mockery. Her stillness during the attack hadn't been weakness. It had been the composure of someone who had faced genuinely dangerous situations. The torn fatigues and scattered equipment had been temporary inconveniences rather than serious problems. She had remained calm because she understood the difference between real threats and playground harassment. Her lack of defensive reaction had confused the perpetrators who expected fear or anger. But her response had been appropriate to someone whose perspective had been shaped by actual combat rather than training scenarios. The general salute had simply made visible what should have been obvious to anyone with genuine military understanding. She deserved respect based on her documented service rather than their uninformed assumptions. The incident became a teaching moment about prejudice assumptions and the importance of recognizing merit regardless of appearance or demeanor. Military service attracted individuals from diverse backgrounds with varying communication styles. Quiet professionalism was as valuable as aggressive leadership. Individual contribution mattered more than conformity to social expectations. Her example influenced the entire training culture. Harassment decreased significantly as cadets began understanding that appearances could be deceptive. Respect increased for individuals who demonstrated competence through actions rather than words. The training environment became more professional and less tolerant of bullying behavior. Her presence had elevated standards without her speaking a single word about the changes needed. The following week, morning drill sessions began in complete professional silence. No one engaged in casual mockery anymore. When she entered the training field, cadets instinctively stepped aside, not out of fear or intimidation, but out of genuine recognition and respect. One by one, those who had previously laughed at her expense began offering respectful nods of acknowledgement when they encountered her. Some attempted to apologize directly for their previous behavior. She didn't respond verbally to their efforts, but she didn't need to provide verbal forgiveness. Her continued professional demeanor communicated more effectively than any speech about moving forward constructively. The general returned to the facility several weeks later for the scheduled graduation ceremony. This time, when he stepped out of his official vehicle, he didn't survey the training area or acknowledge other personnel. He walked directly toward her position with the same measured purpose he had displayed during their first encounter. And this time, when he rendered his formal military salute, every cadet instructor and staff member present followed his example. The collective salute created a moment of recognition that transcended individual acknowledgement. It represented institutional acceptance of her value and contributions. Her transformation from harassment victim to respected colleague was complete. But the more significant transformation had occurred among the other personnel who had witnessed the entire sequence of events. They had learned that dignity didn't require verbal defense, that true strength often manifested as controlled restraint rather than aggressive retaliation, that professional competence spoke louder than social dominance, that assumptions based on appearance or communication style could be dangerously wrong. The training culture had evolved beyond superficial hazing toward genuine professional development. Cadets began focusing on their own improvement rather than tearing down others. Instructors emphasized merit-based evaluation rather than conformity to social expectations. The facility's reputation improved as word spread about their commitment to recognizing diverse forms of excellence. Her influence extended far beyond her individual experience. She had become a symbol of perseverance, professionalism, and quiet leadership. New recruits arriving at the facility would hear her story as part of their orientation, not as official curriculum, but as institutional wisdom passed down through personal example. The lesson was clear. Military service required many different types of strength. Verbal aggression was just one form of leadership. Silent competence was equally valuable. Individual contribution mattered more than social popularity. Years later, graduates from that training facility would carry those lessons into their military careers. They would remember the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize genuine capability. They would understand that harassment revealed more about perpetrators than victims. They would appreciate that some of the most effective leaders operated through example rather than commands. Her story became part of the facility's unofficial history, a reminder that dignity could survive public humiliation, that professional excellence eventually overcame social prejudice, that respect was earned through consistent service rather than demanded through aggressive behavior. The general salute had lasted only moments, but its impact continued influencing military culture long after both individuals had moved to other assignments. She had achieved something remarkable without speaking a word in her own defense. She had changed institutional culture through personal example. She had demonstrated that true strength didn't require public acknowledgement to be effective. Her legacy lived in the improved professional environment she had inspired and in the countless military personnel who learned that dignity could be maintained under any circumstances. If you believe dignity doesn't need a voice to rise, subscribe to The Ordinary Heroes.